Hey there, today I am here to wrap up my audiobooks for December. I'm not gonna lie, this was not the greatest audiobook month for me. In fact, I only listened to 2 things, largely because we were moving house and I kind of didn't feel like listening to anything for a while, and also yeah, I've not been really in the mood for audiobooks this month, but I did listen to 2, as I say, so I will talk to you about those. The first of being The View from the Cheap Seats by Neil Gaiman, also narrated by Neil Gaiman. Now, I've been kind of had this on my radar for a while. I very nearly picked it up in a bookshop a few months ago, but actually I thought I would really enjoy to listen to it because it's a book of essays, and basically it's just speeches that Neil Gaiman has given, introductions that he's written, just all collated together. It's also got his commencement speech in there, but I knew that the audiobook was narrated by Neil Gaiman. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Neil Gaiman's work. He's not really for me. Fantasy and stuff like that is not really my bag, but I really enjoy Neil Gaiman as a writer, as a person. I think he's fascinating. I think his voice is lovely and calming. I really enjoy listening to Neil Gaiman videos on YouTube and just watching interviews with him more than I do reading his books. So I knew that I wanted to listen to this because I wanted to hear it from his mouth, if you know what I mean. And I was right, listening to an audiobook by Neil Gaiman was absolutely lovely. He's so English and gentle and just lovely speaking voice, and that was really nice. I have to say, this it was hit and miss for me, and I think that's kind of typical with an essay collection. I think especially listening to it, although I got the benefit of hearing it from Neil Gaiman's point of view, I don't necessarily think it's meant to be read from cover to cover. Obviously there are speeches in here that kind of repeat points, because they've kind of been put together rather than written to go together, so there is some repetition. There are sections in here that didn't necessarily interest me, like there's a massive section on the sci-fi culture, there's a massive section on comics and comic collections, and again that didn't really interest me, so I did end up skipping a few things and listening to a few things that wouldn't necessarily have interested me if I were reading it. So by the end it was dragging a bit, and it was quite tedious because it is 15 hours and it is, like, as I say, just speeches and introductions and things like that. But ultimately I enjoyed this. I think it was sweet, it was nice. I think if you are going to listen to this or read it, go into it knowing that there are going to be things that don't interest you, and don't force yourself to listen to essays just because you feel that you should. Don't be afraid to skip through. I think that's always what essay collections are intended for. I personally don't overly get along with essay collections, just because they're not really a medium that I don't know, they're not really a medium I gel with. I'm glad I listened to this. It had some bits about Neil Gaiman's writing. As I say, it had his commencement speech in there, which I'm really glad to have wherever I go, because it's probably my favourite commencement speech ever, about making good art. Things like that, and there are also some really lovely essays in here about Amanda Palmer, obviously Neil Gaiman's wife, what's really nice is that a lot of the essays that he wrote about her were actually written before they got together, so that's really lovely. It was fine, didn't rave about it. If you like Neil Gaiman, I suppose I would recommend it. If you like sci-fi and things like that, I would recommend it. It was enjoyable. I don't know that it was my favourite, honestly, but it was fine, and it was kind of what I needed at the time because it was just easy listening, and as I say, Neil Gaiman's narration is spot on. Then, because it was the festive period and this was on daily deals on Audible, I also listened to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, narrated by Michael York. This was, again, it's not my favourite. It's not a children's book that I particularly love. I did start reading the whole series of the Narnia books a few years ago, and I really enjoyed the first one. I can't remember what it's called, Prince Kasabian maybe, but the second one really didn't appeal to me, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is strange because it's the story that we all know and love, but actually the book is kind of lackluster. It's very short. It's not overly Christmassy, to be fair. My Father Christmas makes an appearance, and there is obviously Snow and the Snow Queen, and it's a story that we tend to watch films of at Christmas time, so in that respect it's Christmassy, but it always kind of leaves me a bit lacking. I don't need to tell you what this is about. Kids find a world called Narnia in the wardrobe, and the world has been taken over by an evil Snow Queen, and they go on a mission to save it. It was fun and it was enjoyable. It was only 4 hours long to listen to, so it wasn't a massive commitment, and it did kind of get me in the magical mood. I don't know whether the narration of this is quite old, but it did have a kind of oldie feely to it, which also was kind of cozy, and yeah, it was fine. As I say, it's not my favourite kids book, and I think the heavy Christian references are all a bit much, but I enjoyed listening to it nonetheless, and I'm glad that I gave it a go before Christmas. So that's everything I listened to this month. I've also been listening to West Cork towards the end of the month, which is possibly why I also haven't listened to as much. I fancied a podcast like that I could just get lost in. So yeah, hopefully in January I will listen to a little bit more. Please let me know down below if you have been listening to anything interesting this month, and I will see you next time. Bye.